Hello from Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and thank you for joining me today for the online sessions of 2020's Central Asian Trade Forum by USAID. My name is Stephen Lioy. I'm a tourism development consultant, primarily for USAID and Helvetas, but additionally a travel writer and photographer for Lonely Planet, BBC Travel, World Nomads, and a number of other international brands. And in a Central Asian context, most notably, I researched the Kyrgyzstan chapter and curated the Central Asian book for Lonely Planet in the most recent edition. I'm joining you today to talk a bit about digital marketing in the COVID era and how both tourism boards and brands can utilize digital marketing to increase their audience presence. So in order to effectively discuss these concepts, I prepared a small presentation. And in this, we're going to talk about two large organizational case studies by global brands. And then we're going to look more closely at a national tourism board within Central Asia and their use of targeted social media advertising to reach their clients directly. This information should be helpful to operators at all levels of the tourism sector, whether national tourism boards or individual firms, because it directly addresses direct client marketing, awareness building of the brand, and feeds clients directly into an operator's booking funnel. This is particularly useful during COVID when our normal marketing channels, such as in-person conferences, are closed, but it has relevance in regular tourism seasons as well, and is something that we really should all be looking to going forward. So again, I wrote for Lonely Planet Central Asia's 7th edition, the chapter on Kyrgyzstan, and curated the entire book. And then more recently, I wrote the Central Asian Silk Road section of the Best in Travel 2020 campaign. That obviously hasn't had quite the impact we had hoped that it would because of the downturn in tourism since then, but I was really proud to be able to feature this beautiful region in such a broadly global campaign run by Lonely Planet. I've also recently written an article for Korean Airlines Morning Call magazine about Kyrgyzstan that you can see if you look online. And in July and August of this year, I published photography in Aramco World magazine about Tashkent's underground masterpieces, obviously the beautiful metro system in Tashkent. That was really a joy both to photograph and then to be able to publish and highlight. So moving into this first case study. We're going to look a little at Lonely Planet's work with Singapore Airlines on the Adventures Ahead campaign from several years ago. And you can see a link at the bottom here if you want to go look in a little bit more detail at their outcomes, but we're going to go through the highlights here. The goals for Singapore Airlines were to build brand awareness around the Singapore Airlines brand and highlight the number of destinations that they fly to make potential customers more aware of just where it's possible to go and what it's possible to do with Singapore. Additionally, they wanted to grow their social media audience on Singapore's channels and then boost the engagement of that audience on those channels. And of course, part of all of any campaign is to inspire bookings. For this one specifically, it was looking at bookings later after the campaign were done by collecting users' data and their contact details specifically. So the first part of it, this was a campaign in which Lonely Planet and Singapore together pooled media from Singapore's flight destinations in order to build a one-year calendar based on photos. And then they invited users to submit their own content from these destinations in order to include them in the campaign. So part of this was to build awareness of the brand and of course where Singapore flies to, because they're highlighting all the destinations that users can submit content from. It was really useful for growing engagement with Singapore's channels because of course users were commenting and sharing as part of the campaign once they had submitted their content. And then additionally, for users to submit content, they had to agree, double opt-in, they had to agree twice for Singapore to collect their email data and personal data. I don't know if GDPR is quite well known yet among Central Asian tour operators, but it should be because these are the European rules for what you're allowed to do with personal data, specifically as it comes to online in our case. And though the US doesn't have quite as strict regulations, they still have similar regulations. So if this is not something you know about your website, this is sort of beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but I would urge you to look into it and make sure that your website is GDPR compliant. So the first part of the campaign was to invite the user-generated content. The second part of the campaign, of course, was to announce the winners of the contest, which photos were selected for inclusion in the calendar. If I remember correctly, the winners of the contest also won free trips with Singapore Airlines. As is very common in these sort of contest campaigns, part of the voting is generally for users to share their own submission to get their friends and family and network to vote on it. And what happens when you do that is not only are you building your own brand awareness because the users are organically sharing your content for you, you're also building backlinks to bring up your SEO profile, for example, from travel media outlets. And of course, you're getting your users, friends and family and networks to promote your channels as well, to share, to vote, to click through. So it really can be powerful for building engagement with users and for building a stronger user base, both on social media channels and for your own direct email marketing campaigns later. So you'll see again a URL at the bottom for digitalvisitor.com, and we're looking at their case study with Tourism Belize. Now, the client goals with Belize Tourism were very similar to the first case study. They wanted to improve their brand awareness. They had a specific market in mind here. They wanted to collect users' contact details for further direct marketing. And in this campaign, they actually had some of the campaign leading directly into the sales funnel with two of their partner tour operators. And so the way that they structured the campaign is first they started with a multi-channel targeted social advertising campaign on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And especially on Instagram, they did a great job of really targeting each piece of content to the ideal thematic audience. So for example, they had a picture of food from Belize, and they really targeted the audience data to where it targeted users that were interested in food and foodie culture. They had hiking content that went towards users that were interested in outdoors and so on. And again, I would urge you to look at their website for examples of this that we're not going to show here because it really is quite insightful. And the second part of their campaign is they had two contests with two of their partner tour operators that were double opt-in entry so they could collect users' contact details. And so this did sort of two things. First, it built their client list significantly so that they had clients' contact details to market directly to them later, both from the Belize Tourism Organization and from the two tour operators. But it also built that brand awareness because part of the campaigns involved users watching a YouTube video that talked about the diversity of tourism offerings in Belize. And so this two-part program really was a useful way to build brand awareness of a country that, in their mind, not a lot of these users in their target destination knew much about. The results of the campaign, if you check out the case study, there's more than 15 million impressions across YouTube, social media, and websites. For these tour operators, it led to an 100% increase in bookings, and then between the two, they had an additional 6,542 email opt-ins. And these are clients, of course, that they can market to directly later through their email newsletters and email channels. And of course, what client, what tour operator, what national tourism board wouldn't want to have these results? But these are two very large case studies, and I've chosen these deliberately because these are often the kind of things that national tourism boards are able to run, but that for individual tour operators can often feel out of reach simply because of the cost and the technical know-how involved in running them. And so that's why we're going to move on to our third case study with the Discover Kyrgyzstan Facebook and Instagram pages. Given that I think the majority of people watching this will be either tour operators or perhaps representatives of tourism boards in the region, this is really the section that I would like to highlight and to really emphasize how useful and effective social media targeted advertising can be for both reaching your customers, your potential customers, and reaching them in a very cost-effective way compared to other forms of advertising. So we're going to look here at two examples recently from the Discover Kyrgyzstan pages. In fact, this one was finished on October 5th, so not long ago as I'm recording this. And you can see that this post was promoted with $30 in advertising spending and reached about 9,000 people with 86 post engagements. Now, $30 for 9,000 people isn't a lot compared to something like $30 for 30,000 people. Of course, there's a natural tendency for people to look at these and think that 30,000 must be best because it's simply a much higher number. But the key that doesn't always get brought up in that is that it really depends on who the audiences are that you're targeting. I think most tour operators, at least, should have a fairly firm idea of where their major client base is. They should have a firm idea from previous years of work who's primarily booking their tours, who's spending the most money on their tours, who represents the best value for the tour operator as a client. And that, to me, is really where this sort of targeted advertising can come in very powerful for your marketing efforts. Because, after all, it's not only the cost of the audience that's important, but it's the value of that audience to you. And so looking at these two posts where we spent $30 on each post, we see the cost per view and cost per engagement for each. So that's how much have we paid for every person that saw the post, and how much have we paid for every engagement, for every time that somebody shared or liked or clicked or so on the post. And on the left-hand side, the one that saw a smaller reach, we see a cost per view of about 1/3 of 1 penny per person, and a cost per engagement of about 35 cents per person. That's in US dollars. Whereas on the right, we have about 1/10 of a penny per view and about 2.5 cents per engagement. And so, of course, ideally, we want to get the cost down as low as possible, right? But again, the one on the left was much more closely targeted to an audience from a specific geographic region and with a really specific set of interest, whereas the one on the right was much more broad. And so, for example, if you're a tour operator who's marketing your trekking tours in Central Asia, the audience on the left is simply going to be much more valuable for you because these are the people that are really going to buy your tours. And so it's worth paying that extra money in order to market your material to the people that you actually want to see it and to buy it. Whereas the one on the right reaches a much larger audience, but is much less targeted. So it's good for building brand awareness for a tourism board, say. But for a tour operator that is working in a very specific niche, having a really broad audience isn't really very useful to you if it's not an audience that is going to be the ones that are buying your tours. And so I really want to show another example of this with Discover Kyrgyzstan. And actually, this post is still running, so these numbers will update again before they finish. But we look on the left at the audience, and it's the UAE, Austria, Belgium, Belarus, and so on. I think there's probably 15 or so countries there. And the people that we're targeting are people who already like Discover Kyrgyzstan, this page on Facebook, or friends of those people. And when you look at the photo on the right, it's not immediately clear why we're doing that. But when you expand it, you see why. The full post is on the right, and then on the left you see a slightly easier to read truncated version. And what we have here is a list of the countries that are currently allowed to travel to Kyrgyzstan for tourism purposes. So this is mostly visa-free. And so we've really targeted this post directly to these countries because what we want to do is to tell people that are already following the page, so they're already interested in tourism here, or friends of those people, so presumably people that are also somewhat interested in this sort of travel, that Kyrgyzstan is now open again to tourism, and that for their country it's possible to come here. And note that it's not perfect. Some of these will be nationals of other countries that are living in, say, Germany or Ireland or Iceland, but largely this is what we want. And the post is not done, the ad is not done yet, so we've spent $27.59 so far. But our cost per view is a little over 1.5 cents per person, and our cost per engagement on that is about 6 cents per person. And so to really spread this message to these countries, that you can come here right now as a tourist if you want to, there really are very few other ways to do this that are as cost effective as what we've paid here. And it's really worth noting. You see item number 6 and 7, Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, and then item number 32, Uzbekistan. These have been deliberately excluded from this list of targeted countries. And it's not that those are not tourists that Kyrgyzstan is interested in, but of course this is running now in October, and tourists from those 3 countries typically come either in summertime to go to Issyk or in wintertime to go skiing. And right now neither one of those is happening. So for the moment, we've excluded those 3 countries from this list. But in wintertime, for example, probably we'll directly target at least Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan because those are major markets for Kyrgyzstan tourism in wintertime for freeride and resort skiing. And that really is the power of this sort of advertising, is you can be flexible and at a given moment with a given product really target the audience that you want for that moment and that marketing message. And it's really something you can't do this closely in any other format, and largely because no other platforms have the sort of data that these social media channels have. So really it's a complex topic, and there's no way we can get into the full details of it here. And so I've listed here 3 other items for you to research a little bit further. Hootsuite, Buffer, and MailChimp. These are all very reliable resources. All 3 of them actually offer, say, marketing solutions too, but you don't need to invest in those in order to read these outlines. But all 3 of these have some sort of social media marketing strategy that can help build your marketing plan and help you learn how to really effectively use this sort of targeted advertising on social media. For either tourism boards or tour operators, I really would urge you to consider this one of your main marketing channels, especially at the moment, because the buy-in for this sort of advertising is so low compared to most other forms, and the results really can be quite effective if you're targeting correctly. It's just a matter of learning how to do that targeting and then really closely identifying who your key markets are in order to target them effectively. So I hope this information is useful to you. I hope you're able to build on this into a really effective marketing strategy for your brand and your organization. Feel free to reach out to me at one of these channels if you need any more information or simply want to connect. Here's my website, Instagram, and Twitter that you can reach out and find me to discuss more or just connect. So thank you for your attention. I hope it's been useful for you. And please do enjoy the rest of CATIF 2020. I know we would all prefer to be together somewhere for this, but as these things go, we're trying to make the best of it with these online presentations. Thank you and take care.